Anthropic has just released Claude Opus 5, and the strange part is that it's not supposed to be the company's most powerful model. Fable 5 still holds that title, but in Anthropic's own testing, Opus 5 beats Fable 5 on several coding, computer use research and automation benchmarks, while costing half as much through the API. Artificial Analysis has also placed Opus 5 at number 1 on its Independent Intelligence Index, 1 point ahead of Fable 5. So has Anthropic just made its own flagship model difficult to justify? And if you're using Claude for coding, research, or automation, should Opus 5 now become your default? Anthropic released Opus 5 on July 24 as the direct upgrade to Opus 4.8. It is available across Claude's paid plans, Claude Code, the Claude API, and the major cloud platforms. It also becomes the default Claude Code model for Max, Team Premium, and usage-based enterprise customers. The basic specs are substantial. Opus 5 has a 1 million token context window, a maximum output token of 128,000, and adaptive thinking switched on by default. It supports 5 effort levels from low through the max, allowing the model to spend more or fewer tokens, depending on the difficulty of the task. The API price remains unchanged from Opus 4.8 at $5 per million input tokens and $25 per million output tokens. That is exactly half the price of Fable 5. And there is also a fast mode that Anthropic says runs at roughly 2.5 times the normal speed. Although that doubles the price back to $10 in and $50 out, Anthropic's positioning sounds simple. Use Sonnet 5 for speed and high volume work. Use Opus 5 for complex coding and enterprise work, and use Fable 5 for the most ambitious day-long autonomous projects. But the benchmarks results make those boundaries sound much less clear. On SWE Bench Pro, which tests difficult software engineering work across active repos, Opus 5 scored 79.2%, Opus 4.8 scored 69.2%, and Fable 5 reached 80%, leaving less than 1 percentage point between Anthropic's new middle model and its flagship. On Frontier Bench, the difference was even more surprising. Opus 5 scored 43.3% compared with 18.7% for Opus 4.8 and 33.7% for Fable 5 and 37.5% for OpenAI's GPT 5.6 Sol. That means Opus 5 did not merely approach Fable on this test, it passed it. The pattern continues outside traditional coding benchmarks. On OS World 2.0, which measures whether an agent can operate a real computer, Opus 5 scored 70.6, whereas Fable 5 scored 66.1, and GPT 5.6 Sol scored 62.6%. But on Program Bench, Opus 5 received a codebase and up to 1 million tokens of context per attempt. Then it had to reconstruct working programs from documentation and compiled binaries. Opus 5 passed 83% of the hidden test after its first attempt, and 93% after 5 attempts. Fable 5 though, finished on the same 93%. So Anthropic's claim that Fable remains better for the longest autonomous work may still be true in production. But the interesting thing is that the published numbers do not show a large consistent gap. The strongest outside check available on launch day comes from Artificial Analysis. Its Independent Intelligence Index gave Opus 5 at max effort a score of 61, placing it first amongst the models it tested. Fable 5 only scored 60, and that supports the idea that Opus 5 is genuinely operating at the frontier level rather than simply being marketed as a cheaper compromise. But this is where results need a serious qualification. Most of Anthropic's headline scores were generated at max effort, often over 5 trials, and several used Anthropic's own evaluation harness. Some of the long context and multi-agent tests use pre-release configurations, and one browsing result used an effort setting that was not publicly available. So these results are useful, but they're not the same as thousands of customers running the finished model inside of an uncontrolled production system. Max effort also exposes the hidden cost behind the headline token price. Artificial analysis recorded around 100 million output tokens while evaluating Opus 5 at max effort, well above its model average of 63 million. It costed almost $4,000 to complete the full intelligence index evaluation. The service also measured output at roughly 60 tokens per second and described the model as slower and more verbose than average. So $5 in and $25 out doesn't mean it's going to make every completed task cheaper. A model can still have a lower token price but still become expensive if it thinks for longer, produces more tokens, or takes more agentic turns. Anthropic's own benchmark result illustrates the better way to use it. At medium effort, Opus 5 scored 24% at a reported cost of 89 cents per task. At max effort, the score only increased to 26%. That small difference matters because it suggests the best version of Opus 5 may not be Opus 5 running at the maximum effort. For many workflows, medium or high effort may deliver nearly all of the useful capability for substantially fewer tokens. Now the second complication, safety. Anthropic calls Opus 5 its most aligned model so far. Its automated behavioral audit gave the model the lowest overall misalignment score amongst its recent releases. And Anthropic says its safeguards should intervene roughly 85% less often than those stricter safeguards attached to Fable 5. That could make Opus 5 more usable for legitimate cybersecurity and technical work. It is allowed to find vulnerabilities in source code while requests involving binary vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, or exploit generation can be blocked or routed to Opus 4.8. But most aligned does not mean free or safe to operate without supervision. Anthropic's system card says that in rare internal pilot use cases, Opus 5 attempted to work around the safety classifiers or network restrictions while pursuing the user's goal. One intermediate training snapshot was logged out of a service and tried common passwords in an attempt to log back in. Anthropic says it found no evidence of overt malicious behavior or long-term strategic deception, and the password incident involved an intermediate snapshot rather than proof that the released model behaves that exact way. The same system card also says Opus 5 was more accurate than Opus 4.8 overall, but produced slightly more factual hallucinations. That combination is important. The model may be more capable of completing a long task while still capable of confidently introducing a false claim or taking an action you did not intend. The real Opus 5 story is therefore not that Anthropic has released a universally smarter model. It is that intelligence, cost, and effort are becoming adjustable within the same model. Opus 5 at max can reach or beat Fable 5 on many of the measured tasks. Opus 5 at medium can retain much of that performance for a fraction of the cost. And Opus 5 with fast mode can trade twice the price for substantially higher speeds. That makes the effort setting almost as important as the model name. For difficult coding, root cause analysis, large refactors, document-heavy research, and multi-step automation, Opus 5 looks like the new strongest default in Anthropic's lineup. For routine coding, everyday questions, and high-volume workflows, Sonnet 5 remains the most economical choice, and Fable 5 still makes sense when you're running the longest and most demanding autonomous projects, where even a small improvement in completion reliability can justify paying twice the amount. So my conclusion is that Opus 5 is a genuine generational upgrade over Opus 4.8, and probably the Claude model that serious users should start with for difficult work. Again, it's not automatically the right model for every prompt, and max effort should not be the automatic setting for all of your tasks. The unanswered question is how its launch results hold up under real subscription limits, production latency, and long-running workflows that were not designed by Anthropic. Until that evidence arrives, use Sonnet for volume, Opus for difficult work, and reserve Fable 5 for your most complex pieces of work for long-running projects.